You're listening to Working Through It, a storytime podcast with a mental health lens. Welcome back to the Working Through It podcast. My name is Ciara and I'm your host. I'm so glad that you're joining me today. If it's your first time here, hey, I'm a licensed therapist. I specialize in trauma and grief. And while this is not therapy, this is a safe space for us to talk all things mental health and lift the veil behind it so that you feel a little less isolated and a little more validated. We are a courageously curious community here, which means that we ask the big questions. And so today's question is, how can I best support somebody who's struggling with grief? Great question. I have some answers. Let's get into it. Let's break down what grief actually is. Now, grief is actually the way that we internally respond to a very deep loss. Grief is deep sorrow to something that we had that we no longer have. It can be a death loss. It can be a change in life, a loss of a relationship, a loss of a job, or a phase in life. Grief can be about anything. It's really just deep, deep sorrow. And then we also have mourning. Now, mourning is the action part of our grief. It is the external way that we process the grief that we're experiencing from that loss. One of the most valuable ways to support someone who's grieving is by being able to show them empathy and active listening. There's a difference between hearing somebody and listening, right? So when you're sharing with somebody, have you ever had this happen where they are just trying to fix it and give you the solution? And really all you're trying to do is share what's on your heart. Don't be that person when somebody's struggling with grief. Allow them to just openly speak about what it is that's in their heart. Allow them to share, allow them to cry, be comfortable with just silence sometimes. It's really a way to be able to show that you understand that what they're dealing with is painful. And I always say this all the time, actually. With my clients, I usually will say, listen, the most important thing is to realize that people are not mind readers. And so you want to give them the opportunity to be able to express what they feel. And if you're the other side of that and you're looking to see if somebody's going to reciprocate with you, probably the best thing to do would be to share what it is that you need. So I find sometimes when I feel stressed and I don't know how to support somebody, I ask the question literally. I just say, hey, how can I best support you? Are you needing me just to listen right now? Or are you looking for advice? I'm not a mind reader, but that's going to give room now for that person to be able to share what it is that they're dealing with in a way that doesn't allow them to feel like they have to take advice when they don't want it or speak when they don't want to talk. And it just helps me to know how to support them best. So that's a really great tip that you can use. A crucial part of supporting somebody that's grieving is being able to validate what they're feeling. Even if you don't fully understand it, even if your own subjective reality of what you're of similar experience, but it is not the same experience because you didn't have the exact same relationship with that person. But the person that lost something is the one that gets to choose how they're grieving. And so being able to share that and being able to say, like, I understand, I'm hearing you say this. I can only imagine what that would feel like based on what you've shared. I can understand how you feel that way. And being able to create a safe and supportive space for them really can be helpful. Before we go any further, if you haven't already, make sure you go ahead and stop right now what you're doing. Hit the subscribe bell and notifications. If you're enjoying this content, join the family. We are all about accepting here and allowing you to have a safe space to learn about mental health, to learn about how yourself and how to support others. The next tip that I will give that I think is a great way to support somebody who's struggling with grief is to take the time and do practical things, right? Take them out to dinner, bring them food, clean, offer to take their dog for a walk, offer to just mow their lawn. Just doing something that when you're really struggling with grief would be so much harder for you. It's hard sometimes for somebody who's struggling with grief to even get out of bed. So being able to just provide support in a way that they'd choose to be supported. So don't shove it down their throat. Ask them if it would be okay. Just say, hey, listen, I was going to do a little bit of tidying up. Or, hey, I brought you something to eat. Or, hey, I was going to go swing by. Would you like me to bring you something? And just giving room for them to be able to choose instead of you saying how they want to be supported. But those are really great ways to alleviate some of the burdens that they may be feeling. And so that those people who are struggling with grief can focus in on their healing. Another really great tip for anybody who's struggling with supporting somebody who's struggling with grief, don't apply your own timeline and expectation for them. Find a way to be able to communicate with them that whatever it is that they need, they can take as long as they need to be able to work through that. It's even worse for somebody to say that you should be over this by now, or why are you still crying about that, or why are you still upset about that? That will take somebody's feelings, invalidate them, and very often make them feel very isolated and shamed and feel like there's something wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with the fact that you may be struggling a little bit longer. Now, is there a formal diagnosis called complicated grief disorder where somebody may be dealing with a prolonged grief? Yes. And at that point, it might be helpful to suggest seeking therapy, but make sure that you do it in a way that's caring. And again, let the other person lead in that. My final suggestion on how you can help support somebody who's struggling with grief would be self-care, encouraging them to seek self-care. That can be anything from hobbies to just taking a shower, doing laundry, and maybe not saying you smell, go hop in the shower. That probably won't be an effective way to do that, but just saying, hey, is there something that I can do to help kind of support you in this? Would you like to go for a walk? Would you like to go do this paint by numbers class or whatever that is, but hobbies that they enjoy that can increase their well-being and help them to really align with life moving forward after the loss that they've experienced, whether it's a death loss or even any other type. So remember, being present, offering empathy, validating their feelings are essential components for providing support. I had to read it. I'm not going to lie. I cheated. All right. I have it written down. It's hard for me to remember every single thing I'm going to say to you guys. So yes, I would like to remind you that if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks again for joining us today, friends. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to do all the podcasty things. Give us a like, share, and follow. That way you can stay up to date and find us right back here with more from Working Through It. Working Through It is a storytime podcast and is not intended for mental health services or advice. If you or someone you know is in emotional distress, contact 988 via text or call to be connected to your local crisis center.